When my 6-year-old daughter, Kendra, stood up in that courtroom, holding a piece of paper that would destroy her father's case, I realized I'd been playing this all wrong. The judge's hand actually trembled as she looked at what my baby had drawn. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Naomi Porter. I'm 32 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been fighting a war I never thought I'd have to fight. Not against poverty, though that's been hard enough. Not against exhaustion from working 2 jobs, but against the man who once promised to love and protect us. Marcus Coleman, my ex-husband, stood there in his $3,000 suit, looking every inch the successful corporate lawyer he'd become. His mother Lorraine sat behind him, diamonds glittering on her fingers as she whispered to their legal team. 3 lawyers. They brought 3 lawyers to take my daughter away from me. And there was Kendra, my whole world, sitting beside me, in her little purple dress, the one we'd bought at Goodwill last month for her school picture day. She'd been so excited when we found it. "Mommy, it's my favorite color," she'd said, spinning around in the thrift store like it was a ball gown. Judge Winters sat high above us all, her black robes making her look like some kind of powerful deity who would decide our fate. She was in her 50s, with silver streaks in her hair and eyes that had probably seen every kind of family tragedy imaginable. I wondered if she'd ever seen anything like what was about to happen. The courtroom smelled like old wood and floor polish. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. This was it. 3 months of preparation, 3 months of sleepless nights, 3 months of Marcus's lawyers sending letter after letter about how I couldn't provide for Kendra properly. How a waitress who did freelance graphic design on the side couldn't possibly give a child what a successful lawyer could. They didn't know about the drawings. They didn't know what Kendra had been quietly documenting in her little notebook. They didn't know that sometimes the truth comes in crayon and construction paper, delivered by the steadiest hands in the room, even if those hands belong to a 6-year-old. That morning started like every other morning in our small apartment, except my stomach was in knots. I'd been up since 4:30, staring at the ceiling, running through everything that could go wrong. The coffee maker gurgled in the kitchen while I stood in front of my closet, looking at the same 5 outfits I'd been rotating for months. "Mommy?" Kendra's voice came from her doorway. She was already dressed in her purple dress, the one she'd insisted on wearing. Her hair was a mess of tangles from sleep, and she clutched her favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts. "Morning, baby, you're up early." I couldn't sleep. My tummy feels funny. I knew exactly what she meant. I walked over and scooped her up, even though she was getting almost too big for me to carry. "How about some breakfast? We've got your favorite cereal." In the kitchen, I poured the generic honey loops into her favorite bowl, the one with butterflies on it that we'd found at a yard sale. Kendra sat at our small table, swinging her legs back and forth. She watched me with those big brown eyes that looked just like her father's, back when he used to look at me with love instead of contempt. "Why do I have to wear my nice dress?" she asked between bites. I sat down across from her, holding my coffee mug with both hands to keep them steady. "We're going somewhere important today, baby." "Is it about Daddy?" The question hit me like a punch. Kendra was too smart, too observant. She'd heard the phone calls, seen the official-looking letters that made me cry when I thought she wasn't looking. "Yes, sweetie, just remember, whatever happens, Mommy loves you." "I know," she said simply, then added, "Can I bring my drawing notebook?" "Of course you can." I watched her eat, memorizing every detail, the way she separated the loops by color before eating them, the little milk mustache she always got, the way she hummed quietly to herself, some made-up tune that sounded happy despite everything. Our apartment wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that was really just part of the living room. The walls needed painting and the carpet was worn thin in places, but we'd made it home. Kendra's artwork covered the refrigerator. Her toys had their special corners. Her books lined the windowsill in her room because we couldn't afford a bookshelf yet. After breakfast, I braided her hair while she sat on the bathroom counter. She chattered about her friend Aisha at school, about the butterfly they'd seen at recess, about her teacher, Miss Janet, who said she was the best artist in the class. "Mommy, are you scared?" she asked suddenly, meeting my eyes in the mirror. I paused, holding her half-finished braid. "How do you answer that? How do you tell your 6-year-old that you're terrified of losing her?" "A little bit," I admitted. But you know what? Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right even when you are scared. She nodded solemnly, like she was filing that information away. Then she reached up and patted my hand. It's okay, Mommy. We have each other. I finished her braid with shaking fingers, adding the purple hair tie that matched her dress. When I was done, she hopped down and ran to get her backpack. I saw her slip her drawing notebook inside, along with her box of crayons. The drive to the courthouse took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of Kendra singing along to the radio, of me gripping the steering wheel too tight, of watching the city wake up around us. Other people heading to normal jobs, living normal lives, not about to walk into a courtroom where their whole world could be torn apart. I'd been working 2 jobs for the past year, days at the Sunrise Diner where the regulars knew Kendra by name and always asked about her, nights at home designing logos and websites for small businesses, Kendra asleep in the next room while I squinted at my laptop screen. Every penny counted. Every penny went to keeping us afloat. Marcus had money. Marcus had connections. Marcus had his mother, Lorraine, who'd never liked me even when we were married. She's not our kind of people, I'd overheard her say once at a family dinner. Now she was funding his fight to take Kendra away. But Marcus didn't have what I had. He didn't have Kendra's goodnight hugs. He didn't have her laughter filling up the small spaces. He didn't have her trust, the kind that made her crawl into my bed during thunderstorms or tell me about the boy who was mean to her at school. As we pulled into the courthouse parking lot, I saw his BMW already there. The anger rose up in my throat like bile. That car cost more than I made in 2 years, and he was going to use everything, to try to prove he was the better parent. Mommy, look, Kendra said, pointing at a bird perched on the courthouse steps. It's a cardinal. Miss Janet says they're good luck. I squeezed her hand. Then that's our good luck bird, baby. You ready? She squeezed back, her little fingers strong and sure. I'm ready, Mommy. Don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. But as we walked up those courthouse steps, her hand in mine, her purple dress catching the morning light, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. I just didn't know that the change would come from the smallest, bravest person in that courtroom, armed with nothing but crayons and the truth. The courtroom was exactly what you'd expect from every movie you've ever seen, except colder. The wooden benches were hard and unforgiving. The fluorescent lights cast everything in a harsh glare, and the smell of floor wax mixed with too much cologne from Marcus's side of the room. I guided Kendra to our seats, trying not to look at the army he'd assembled. Marcus walked in like he owned the place. That same confident stride that used to make me feel protected now made my skin crawl. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, his shoes so shiny you could see your reflection. Behind him, his mother Lorraine wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. She looked at me with the same disgust she might show a cockroach. Then her eyes landed on Kendra and her expression shifted to something almost predatory. All rise for the Honorable Judge Winters, the bailiff announced. Judge Winters entered, her robes flowing behind her. She had a no-nonsense air about her, the kind of woman who'd probably seen every trick in the book. She settled into her chair and looked over the courtroom, her eyes lingering on Kendra for just a moment. We're here today in the matter of Coleman versus Porter, regarding custody of the minor child Kendra Coleman. Mr. Fitzgerald, you may begin. Marcus's lawyer stood up. Bradley Fitzgerald, according to the paperwork. He looked like every corporate shark you'd ever imagine, with his slicked back hair and predatory smile. Your Honor, we're here today because my client, Marcus Coleman, has serious concerns about his daughter's welfare. Ms. Porter, while I'm sure she loves her daughter, simply cannot provide the standard of living and opportunities that Kendra deserves. He pulled out a folder thick with documents. I'd like to present Exhibit A, Your Honor, Ms. Porter's financial records. She works as a waitress at the Sunrise Diner, making minimum wage plus tips. Her secondary income from freelance graphic design is sporadic and unreliable. Just last month, she was late on her rent payment. My face burned. Yes, I'd been late on rent because Kendra had gotten sick and I'd had to miss 3 shifts to take care of her, because the antibiotics weren't covered by my pathetic insurance, because being a single mother meant choosing between medicine for your child and keeping a roof over her head. Furthermore, Fitzgerald continued, warming to his theme. Miss Porter lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in a questionable neighborhood. The schools in that district are rated below average. She has no savings account, no college fund established for Kendra, no concrete plans for the child's future education. He made it sound like I was some kind of negligent monster, like love could be measured in bank statements and zip codes. Your Honor, he said, his voice dripping with false concern, Miss Porter works night shifts at the diner and then attempts to work from home. When exactly is she supervising her daughter? When is she helping with homework, attending school functions, being present? I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them about the math homework we did together at the diner when it was slow, Kendra perched on a stool behind the counter, about how I'd never missed a parent-teacher conference, even if it meant begging my manager to switch shifts, about the school play where Kendra was a flower, and I'd stayed up until 3 in the morning hand-sewing her costume because we couldn't afford to buy one. My client, Fitzgerald gestured toward Marcus like he was presenting a prize, is a successful corporate attorney with a 6-figure income. He owns a 4-bedroom home in Westfield, one of the best school districts in the state. He has already established a college fund for Kendra. He can provide tutors, extracurricular activities, travel opportunities, everything a child needs to thrive in today's competitive world. Marcus sat there nodding along, looking every inch the concerned father, the same man who'd missed Kendra's last 3 birthdays because of important business trips, the same man who'd yelled at her for spilling juice on his Italian leather couch, the same man who'd made her cry so hard she threw up, then blamed me for raising her to be too sensitive. We'd like to call our first witness, Your Honor, in Mrs. Lorraine Coleman. Lorraine stood up, smoothing her skirt, and made her way to the witness stand like she was walking a red carpet. After she was sworn in, she folded her hands in her lap and put on an expression of grandmotherly concern that made me want to vomit. Mrs. Coleman, Fitzgerald began, can you tell us about your observations of Miss Porter's parenting? Lorraine's voice was sugar-sweet poison. Well, I've tried to maintain a relationship with my granddaughter, despite the obstacles. Naomi has made it very difficult. She uses Kendra as a weapon against my son. Whenever Marcus tries to spend extra time with his daughter, she creates problems, doctor's appointments that suddenly come up, school events that were forgotten until the last minute. Lies. All lies. Marcus canceled more visits than he kept. I'd stopped telling Kendra when he was supposed to come because I couldn't bear to see her disappointment anymore. She's vindictive, Lorraine continued, and frankly unstable. The last time I tried to pick up Kendra for a grandmother-granddaughter day, Naomi screamed at me in front of the child, called me names I won't repeat in court. Is that the kind of environment a child should be raised in? I remembered that day differently. Lorraine had shown up unannounced, demanding to take Kendra to get her ears pierced after I'd specifically said no. When I refused, she'd called me white trash, said I was ruining Kendra's chances at a better life. Yes, I'd raised my voice. Yes, I'd told her to leave. But I hadn't screamed. I hadn't called her names. I just protected my daughter's bodily autonomy. And the living conditions. Lorraine shook her head sadly. That apartment is so small. Kendra doesn't even have a proper playroom. Her toys are crammed into corners. She deserves so much better. Marcus can give her that. A beautiful room of her own, a backyard to play in, a neighborhood where she can ride her bike safely. Kendra shifted beside me, and I felt her small hand slip into mine. She was listening to every word, absorbing it all. I squeezed her hand gently. When it was time for Marcus to testify, he put on the performance of his life. His voice was calm, reasonable, tinged with just the right amount of concern. I love my daughter more than anything in this world, he said, looking directly at the judge. I just want what's best for her. Yes, Naomi loves her too. I'm not questioning that, but love isn't enough. Kendra needs stability, opportunities, the chance to reach her full potential. He talked about the private school he'd already toured, the violin lessons he'd arranged, the pediatrician who was the best in the state. He painted a picture of a life where Kendra would want for nothing, except maybe a father who actually saw her as a person instead of a possession. I have the resources to give Kendra everything she needs, Marcus concluded. Educational opportunities, cultural experiences, a network of successful people who can open doors for her future. I can be present for her in ways that Naomi, with her work schedule and financial limitations, simply cannot. My pro bono legal advisor, a law student named Jamie, who was doing her best but was clearly out of her league, had warned me this would be bad. "They're going to make it all about money," she'd said. "Don't let them bait you into getting emotional. Stay calm. Focus on what you can prove." But how do you prove love in a courtroom? How do you show a judge that the size of a house doesn't matter when your daughter feels safe in your arms? How do you explain that designer clothes and private schools mean nothing if the person buying them makes you feel worthless? Judge Winters was taking notes, her expression unreadable. I could feel the case slipping away from me with every word they spoke. In their version of reality, I was the failure, the mother who couldn't provide, the bitter ex-wife standing in the way of her daughter's bright future. Kendra's hand tightened in mine. When I looked down at her, she was staring straight ahead, her jaw set in that determined way she had. She looked so much older than 6 in that moment. Too old. No child should have to sit in a courtroom and listen to adults fight over her like she was a prize to be won. The morning wore on. More testimony from Marcus's side. Financial advisors talking about trust funds and investment portfolios. A child psychologist Marcus had hired who'd met Kendra exactly once, but was prepared to testify about the developmental advantages of a 2-parent household with greater resources. They never mentioned the bruises I'd photographed but couldn't prove Marcus had caused. They never mentioned Kendra's nightmares after visits with her father. They never mentioned the time she'd begged me, tears streaming down her face, not to make her go to Daddy's house. Because I didn't have proof, just the word of a vindictive ex-wife who was probably coaching her child. That's what Jamie said they'd argue if I brought it up. By the time Judge Winters called for a lunch recess, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. Every inadequacy in my life had been laid bare for strangers to judge. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every hard choice had been twisted into evidence of my unfitness as a mother. As we stood to leave for lunch, Lorraine brushed past me. "Just give up now," she whispered, low enough that only I could hear. "You can't win this. Don't put Kendra through any more trauma. Let her go to where she belongs." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood, because causing a scene would just prove their point about my instability, because showing anger would be used against me, because in this courtroom, in this system, being poor was apparently a worse crime than being cruel. During the lunch break, Kendra and I sat in my car eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches I'd packed that morning. Neither of us had much appetite. She nibbled at the corner of her sandwich, looking out the window at the courthouse steps where other families came and went, living their own dramas. "Mommy, why did Grandma Lorraine say those things about us?" she asked quietly. I put down my sandwich and turned to face her. Sometimes adults say things that aren't true when they want something really badly. But lying is wrong. "Yes, baby, it is." She was quiet for a moment, then reached into her backpack and pulled out her drawing notebook. She flipped through the pages slowly, past pictures of rainbows and butterflies, past drawings of her friends at school, until she stopped at some newer ones. Her fingers traced over the crayon marks. "I've been drawing what happens," she said simply, "so I won't forget." My heart stopped. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "Things that happen at Daddy's house, and things that happen at our house. So I can remember which is true." I wanted to look, wanted to see what she'd documented in her 6-year-old way, but something held me back. This was hers, her truth, her way of processing everything that had happened. When we walked back into the courtroom, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. I wasn't going to try to compete with Marcus's money or defend myself against every twisted accusation. I was going to focus on the only thing that mattered, Kendra's well-being. Jamie looked nervous as I sat down. "Naomi, stick to what we practiced. Just present the facts." But I was done practicing, done rehearsing lines that made me sound like I was reading from a script. When Judge Winters called the court back to order and it was my turn to present my case, I stood up with a clarity I hadn't felt all morning. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm not going to stand here and pretend I can give Kendra everything Marcus can. I can't afford private schools or violin lessons or European vacations. That's just fact." I saw Fitzgerald smirk, probably thinking I was handing them the case. Let him think that. But I'd like to talk about what I can provide. Kendra has maintained straight A's at her public school, not because of expensive tutors, but because we do homework together every night. She reads at a third-grade level because we go to the library every Saturday, and she gets to pick out 5 books. She knows her multiplication tables because we practice them during slow times at the diner, turning it into a game. I pulled out a folder Jamie had helped me prepare. These are letters from Kendra's teachers. Every one of them mentions how well-adjusted she is, how kind she is to other children, how creative and eager to learn. This one, from her art teacher, says Kendra has the most developed emotional intelligence she's seen in a first grader. Judge Winters leaned forward, actually interested now. This is a letter from my manager at the Sunrise Diner. He talks about how Kendra does her homework in the back booth during my evening shifts, how the regular customers have become like extended family to her. Mrs. Chen teaches her Mandarin words. Mr. Foster, a retired teacher, helps her with difficult math problems. Rosa, who works the kitchen, is teaching her Spanish. I could feel the energy in the room shifting. Your Honor, Kendra has perfect attendance at school. She's never missed a day except for when she's been sick. Her medical records show she's up to date on all vaccinations, all checkups. Yes, we go to the community clinic instead of the best pediatrician in the state, but she's healthy and thriving. These are receipts, I continued, pulling out another set of papers. Every month, no matter how tight things get, I put $20 in a jar for Kendra's college fund. It's not a fancy investment portfolio, but by the time she's 18, she'll have almost $3,000 and the knowledge that her education has always been a priority. Marcus shifted in his seat. This wasn't going the way he'd expected. And this, I held up a small photo album, is what our life really looks like. Kendra at the park down the street playing with neighborhood kids. Kendra helping me cook dinner, learning fractions by measuring ingredients. Kendra in her Halloween costume that we made together out of cardboard and paint because she wanted to be a robot princess, something you can't buy in stores. My voice grew stronger. I'm not denying that Marcus has resources I don't, but Kendra has a community. She has stability. She has a mother who has never missed a school event, never forgotten a promise, never made her feel like she's not enough exactly as she is. I looked directly at Marcus then. Can you say the same? Can you tell this court how many of Kendra's soccer games you attended last season? Can you name her best friend? Can you tell us what book she's reading right now, what she wants to be when she grows up, what she's afraid of? His face darkened, but he stayed silent. Your Honor, I concluded, I know I don't look like much on paper, but I'm asking you to look beyond bank statements and zip codes. Look at the child. Look at who she is, how she's thriving, despite what they call limitations. Love might not pay for violin lessons, but it shows up. Every single day, it shows up. As I sat down, the courtroom was quiet. Even Fitzgerald seemed momentarily at a loss. Jamie squeezed my shoulder, and I could feel her relief that I'd stayed calm, hadn't let them bait me into appearing unstable. Judge Winters was reviewing the documents I'd submitted, her expression thoughtful. Mr. Fitzgerald, do you have any response? He stood up, straightening his tie. Your Honor, while Ms. Porter's devotion is admirable, the fact remains that love doesn't pay bills or provide opportunities. My client can offer both love and resources. I see, Judge Winters said. She looked at Kendra then, really looked at her. I'm going to call a brief recess. When we return, I'd like to hear closing arguments. As people started to move, Kendra tugged on my sleeve. Her voice was small but determined. Mommy, I brought something. Can I show the judge? I looked down at her, at the backpack she was clutching, at the resolution in her eyes that seemed far too mature for a 6-year-old. What is it, baby? My pictures. The ones I've been drawing, about what's real. I knelt down to her level. This wasn't part of any plan. Jamie would probably advise against it, but something in Kendra's face, the quiet determination there, made me pause. Are you sure? I asked. She nodded. You said being brave means doing what's right even when you're scared. I want to be brave like you, Mommy. I thought about all the legal advice, all the careful preparation, all the ways this could go wrong. Then I thought about my daughter, who had been listening to adults argue about her life all morning, who had been silent through accusations and lies and carefully crafted narratives that had nothing to do with her reality. "Okay," I said softly. "When the judge comes back, we'll ask if you can show her." Kendra smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her all day. She opened her backpack and pulled out her drawing notebook, holding it carefully like the precious document it was. As people filed back into the courtroom, I caught sight of Marcus's face. He was confident, assured of his victory. He had no idea that the most damning testimony was about to come from the person he'd dismissed as too young to have a voice. Lorraine was whispering urgently to Fitzgerald, probably planning their closing argument. They'd paint me as the desperate mother making an emotional plea in the face of overwhelming evidence of my inadequacy. They'd emphasize Marcus's stability, his resources, his ability to provide the best of everything. They had no idea that the best was about to be redefined by a 6-year-old with a box of crayons and the courage to speak her truth. Judge Winters returned, settling back into her chair. "Before we proceed to closing arguments, are there any other matters?" My heart was pounding. This was it, the moment where everything could change, for better or worse. I stood up slowly. "Your Honor, my daughter has something she'd like to share with the court if you'll permit it." Fitzgerald was on his feet immediately. "Objection, Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The child hasn't been sworn in, hasn't been evaluated for competency." Judge Winters held up a hand. "Mr. Fitzgerald, this is a custody hearing, not a criminal trial. I'm interested in any information that might help me make the best decision for this child." She looked at Kendra with kind eyes. "What is it you'd like to share, sweetheart?" And just like that, the entire courtroom's attention turned to my little girl in her purple dress, holding her notebook like armor, ready to change everything with the simple act of showing what she'd seen. Kendra stood up slowly, her purple dress smoothing down as she clutched her notebook to her chest. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Even the bailiff, who had probably seen everything in his career, leaned forward slightly. "I made pictures," Kendra said, her voice small but clear in the quiet room. "Can I show you?" Judge Winters nodded, her expression gentle. "Of course, sweetheart. Would you like to come up here?" Kendra looked at me, and I gave her an encouraging nod. She walked toward the judge's bench, her little shoes clicking on the floor. Fitzgerald started to object again, but Judge Winters silenced him with a look that could freeze water. "I draw things so I remember them right," Kendra explained as she opened her notebook. "Sometimes grown-ups remember things different than how they really happened." She pulled out the first drawing and held it up. It was done in crayon, but the image was unmistakable. A tall stick figure with angry eyebrows and a huge open mouth, arms raised high above a smaller figure who was cowering. "This is Daddy yelling," she said matter-of-factly. "He does this when I spill things, or when I talk too loud, or when I cry. He yells so loud it makes my ears hurt." Marcus's lawyer tried to interrupt. "Your Honor, these are just children's drawings. They could mean anything." "Let her finish," Judge Winters said firmly, her eyes fixed on the picture. Kendra pulled out the second drawing. This one showed two figures embracing, the larger one wrapping arms around the smaller one, little hearts drawn around them. "This is Mommy hugging me when I have bad dreams about the yelling. She tells me it's not my fault and that I'm not bad. She stays with me until I fall asleep again." Lorraine made a disgusted sound. She obviously coached her to draw these. Kendra turned to look at her grandmother, and the sadness in her eyes was heartbreaking. "No, Grandma, Mommy doesn't even know I drew these. I did it by myself because I wanted to remember what's true." She pulled out a third drawing. This one was more complex. A house divided down the middle. One side was drawn in dark colors, blacks and grays and angry reds. Storm clouds hung over it, and there was a figure in a window looking out. The other side was bright with yellows and greens and blues. Flowers grew in front, and a sun smiled down from the corner. "This is Daddy's house and Mommy's house," Kendra explained. "Daddy's house is big and has lots of nice things, but it feels dark inside. Mommy's house is small, but it feels happy." Judge Winters leaned forward. "Can you tell me more about why Daddy's house feels dark, sweetheart?" Kendra nodded, flipping to another page. This drawing showed a small figure sitting alone at a huge table. This is dinner at Daddy's house. He's usually on his phone. If I try to talk, he says he's busy with important things. Grandma Lorraine tells me to sit up straighter and not make noise with my fork. She flipped to another page, a crowded, messy table with two figures laughing. This is dinner at home. Sometimes we just have mac and cheese. But Mommy always asks about my day. We play games like, what was the best part of today? She never tells me to be quiet. Marcus's face had gone from confident to pale. He started to stand, but his lawyer pulled him back down. Kendra continued, her voice gaining strength. This one is from last month. The drawing showed a figure in a bed, tears on the face. I was sick at Daddy's house. I threw up on his carpet. He yelled about how much it cost and made me sleep in the guest room alone. He said I was being dramatic. She pulled out another drawing. This is when I was sick at home. The picture showed two figures cuddled together on a couch, a bowl nearby, a TV with cartoons. Mommy stayed home from work even though she said she couldn't afford to. She held my hair when I threw up and told me stories to make me feel better. These are just manipulative scribbles, Fitzgerald protested. Children have vivid imaginations. But Kendra wasn't done. She pulled out a drawing that made the entire courtroom go silent. It showed a small figure with arms covered in marks, dark spots colored in with black and purple crayon. This is when I didn't want to go to swimming lessons, she said quietly. Daddy grabbed my arm really hard. He said I was embarrassing him in front of the instructor. It left marks, but he told me not to tell Mommy or I'd get in more trouble. I gasped. I'd seen the bruises, photographed them, but Kendra had told me she fell at the playground. My baby had been protecting him even then. That's a lie, Marcus shouted, jumping to his feet. She's making this up. Naomi put her up to this. Mr. Coleman, sit down immediately, Judge Winters commanded, her voice sharp as steel. Kendra flinched at his outburst but kept going. She pulled out one final drawing. This one was different from the others. It showed three figures, but the middle one, the smallest, was glowing with yellow crayon like she was lit from within. This is what I want, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to live with Mommy all the time. I want to visit Daddy sometimes, but only if he stops yelling, and I want him to see me. What do you mean, see you? Judge Winters asked gently. Kendra looked directly at her father. He looks at me, but he doesn't see me. He sees something he owns, like his car or his watch. Mommy sees me. She sees when I'm happy or sad or scared or excited. She knows my favorite color changed from pink to purple. She knows I don't like crusts on my sandwiches anymore. She knows I want to be an artist when I grow up. She turned back to the judge. I know Daddy has a bigger house. I know he can buy me more things. But Mommy's house feels bigger because there's more love in it, and things aren't as important as feeling safe. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, staring at this brave little girl who had just dismantled every argument the high-priced lawyers had made. Judge Winters's hand was indeed trembling as she looked through each drawing again. Kendra, these are very detailed pictures. When did you draw all of these? Different times, Kendra replied. I started after the divorce. Mommy told me it was okay to have big feelings and that drawing might help. So I drew what happened so I wouldn't forget. And so maybe someday someone would believe me. You coached her, Lorraine shrieked, standing up and pointing at me. You manipulative little witch, you turned her against us. Mrs. Coleman, one more outburst and I'll have you removed from this courtroom, Judge Winters warned. Kendra looked at her grandmother with those old, sad eyes. Nobody coached me, Grandma. I just drew what's true. Don't you want me to tell the truth? She gathered up her drawings carefully, putting them back in order in her notebook. Then she did something that broke my heart and filled it with pride at the same time. She walked over to Marcus and held out one of the pictures, the one of the divided house. You can keep this one, Daddy, she said softly. Maybe it will help you remember that I'm a person, not a thing. And maybe someday your house can have sunshine too. Marcus stared at the drawing like it was a foreign object. His hands shook as he took it from her. For just a moment, I saw something crack in his facade. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was the realization of what he'd lost. Maybe it was just anger at being exposed. But something shifted. Kendra walked back to me, her job done. She'd said what she needed to say, shown what she needed to show. As she climbed into my lap, burying her face in my shoulder, I felt her little body trembling. My brave girl had used up all her courage, and now she was just a tired 6-year-old who'd had to grow up too fast. Judge Winters cleared her throat. I think we've heard enough. Mr. Fitzgerald, Mr. Coleman, do you have any response to what Kendra has shared with us today? Fitzgerald fumbled with his papers. His earlier confidence evaporated. Your Honor, children can be easily influenced. These drawings could have been suggested or guided. Are you suggesting this child fabricated detailed accounts of specific incidents? Judge Winters' voice was ice. Are you telling me a 6-year-old invented bruises, invented being left alone while sick, invented the fear I can see in her eyes when her father raises his voice? She held up the drawing of the bruised arms. This level of detail, the consistent narrative across multiple drawings done over time, the emotional authenticity. This cannot be coached, Mr. Fitzgerald. This is a child documenting her reality the only way she knew how. Marcus finally spoke, his voice hoarse. I never meant to. I just wanted her to be perfect, to have everything I didn't have growing up. But she already is perfect, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. She's perfectly herself. You just never took the time to see it. Judge Winters looked at each of us in turn. Me holding my daughter who had just been braver than most adults ever managed to be. Marcus, clutching that drawing like it might absolve him. Lorraine, whose face had gone from angry red to ghostly white. Fitzgerald, who was already mentally calculating how to spin this disaster. I've made my decision, Judge Winters announced. But first, Kendra, I want to thank you for sharing your pictures with us. You've been very brave today. Your drawings have helped me understand what you need. Kendra peeked out from my shoulder. Are you going to help make things better? I'm going to try my very best, Judge Winters promised. And in that moment, I believed her. Judge Winters took a deep breath before speaking, her voice carrying the weight of everything she'd just witnessed. In my 23 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such clear evidence of a child's truth. Mr. Coleman, these drawings tell a story that all your financial statements cannot dispute. She looked directly at Marcus, who seemed to shrink under her gaze. Money can buy many things, but it cannot buy emotional safety. It cannot buy genuine attention. It cannot buy the kind of love that shows up at 3 a.m. when a child is sick, that celebrates small victories, that sees a person rather than a possession. Custody will remain with Ms. Porter, she continued. Mr. Coleman, you will have supervised visitation every other Saturday for 2 hours until you complete a court-approved anger management program and parenting classes. After successful completion and a review in 6 months, we can discuss expanding visitation. Marcus's lawyer started to object, but Marcus put his hand on his arm. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked defeated. Not angry, not calculating, just empty. Furthermore, Judge Winters added, Mr. Coleman will pay child support in the amount of $800 per month, due on the 1st. Any missed payments will result in immediate legal action. She turned to me. Ms. Porter, I encourage you to continue documenting Kendra's well-being and any concerns during visitations. This court takes the safety of children very seriously. Then she did something unexpected. She looked at Kendra. Sweetheart, I'm keeping your drawings in the official court record. They're important documents that told the truth when adults were trying to hide it. You should be very proud of yourself. Kendra, I also want you to know that it's not your job to protect grown-ups from their own mistakes. You've been very brave, but now it's time to let the adults handle adult problems. Your job is just to be 6 years old. As the judge dismissed the court, the room erupted in movement. Lorraine rushed out, her heels clicking furiously on the floor, but not before she hissed at Marcus, "This is what happens when you marry beneath you." Marcus stood slowly, still holding Kendra's drawing. He looked at me, then at Kendra, and for a moment I saw the man I'd fallen in love with years ago. The one who existed before his mother's poison and his own ambition had transformed him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. 2 words. But from him, they were everything. Kendra looked up at him from my arms. "Will you try to see me now, Daddy?" "The real me?" He nodded, unable to speak. Then he turned and walked out, his expensive shoes echoing in the emptying courtroom. In the parking lot, Jamie hugged us both. "That was incredible. Kendra, you're the bravest kid I've ever met." Kendra smiled shyly. "I was scared." "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared," Jamie said, echoing my words from that morning. "It means doing the right thing even when you are." On the drive home, Kendra was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "Did I do good, Mommy?" "I had to pull over because I was crying too hard to drive safely." "You did perfect, baby. You told your truth." "I was scared Daddy would be mad." "He probably is upset, but not at you. He's upset because he has to face what he's done. That's not your responsibility." She nodded, processing this in that thoughtful way she had. "Maybe now he'll learn to be better." "Maybe," I agreed. "But whether he does or not, you're safe. That's what matters." 2 weeks later, life had settled into a new rhythm. The phone calls from Lorraine had stopped after her lawyer informed her that harassment charges could be filed. Marcus had enrolled in his required classes and sent his first support check on time, something that had never happened before. But the biggest change was in Kendra. The nervous energy that had always surrounded talk of her father was fading. She was sleeping better, laughing more, being a kid again. One evening, I was tucking her into bed when she showed me her new drawings. They were different now. Bright colors dominated the pages, families of all shapes and sizes, all surrounded by hearts and flowers and smiling suns. "Look, Mommy," she said, pointing to one picture. "This is us at the diner, and that's Mrs. Chen teaching me to count in Chinese, and that's Mr. Foster helping with my math." "It's beautiful, baby." Ms. Janet says I should keep drawing my feelings. She says it's a healthy way to process emotions. She sounded so grown up using those words, probably repeating exactly what her teacher had said. Ms. Janet is right. Kendra snuggled into her pillow. "Mommy." I'm glad I showed my pictures, even though it was scary. "Me too, sweet girl." "Do you think other kids have pictures like mine? Secret ones that show what's really true?" The question broke my heart. "I don't know, baby. I hope not." "If they do, I hope they're brave enough to show someone, like I was." I kissed her forehead. "You've already made a difference, you know. Judge Winters will remember your pictures. She'll look more carefully at other kids who might be afraid to speak up." Kendra smiled sleepily. "Good. Every kid should have a house with sunshine." As I turned off her light and headed to the kitchen to work on a design project, I thought about everything we'd been through. The system had almost failed us. Money and power had almost won. But in the end, truth had found a way to speak through the innocent honesty of a child's art. I'd learned that day that sometimes the most powerful voice in the room isn't the loudest or the richest. Sometimes it's the smallest, speaking their truth through crayon and construction paper. Kendra taught me that when you can't afford a lawyer, sometimes all you need is a brave little girl with a box of crayons and the courage to show the world what really matters. The design project I was working on that night was for a new client, a women's shelter. They wanted a logo that represented hope and new beginnings. As I sketched, I found myself drawing a small figure, holding up a picture to the light. Because sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. One brave soul willing to show their truth, no matter how scary it might be. Marcus called the next week. His voice was different, humbled. "I've been looking at the drawing she gave me," he said. "The house with 2 sides. I want to learn how to put sunshine in my side." "That's up to you," I told him. "But wanting to is the first step." The therapist in my anger management class says I have a lot of work to do. Years of it, probably. "Kendra's worth it," I said simply. "Yes," he agreed. "She is." 3 months later, at his first supervised visit, Kendra showed him her new drawings. These ones included him, but now the figure was smiling, sitting at her level, really looking at her. Hope on paper, drawn in purple crayon. Judge Winters had been right to keep those original drawings as court documents. They were evidence of something the legal system often misses, that children see everything, remember everything, and sometimes have the courage to speak truths that adults are too afraid to voice. Our small apartment was still small. I still worked 2 jobs. We still ate generic cereal and shopped at thrift stores. But Kendra was right. Our house had sunshine. It had love that showed up, day after day, in lunch notes and bedtime stories, and help with homework at a diner counter. And in a drawer in my desk, carefully preserved, were copies of the drawings that changed everything. Not because I needed reminders of that terrible day, but because they were proof of my daughter's incredible courage. Proof that truth, even when drawn in crayon by a 6-year-old's hand, has the power to topple kingdoms built on lies. The story could have ended differently. It almost did. But sometimes, grace comes in unexpected forms. Sometimes, justice wears a purple dress and carries a notebook full of pictures. Sometimes, the meek really do inherit the earth, one honest drawing at a time. And that drawing Judge Winters kept? She told me later it was framed in her chambers, a reminder that in every custody case, behind all the legal arguments and financial statements, there's a child with their own truth to tell. If only someone will give them the chance to tell it. Kendra still draws every day, but the storm clouds are gone. In our small apartment with our generic cereal and secondhand furniture, we have something Marcus's money could never buy. A home where love lives louder than fear, where truth is welcomed even when it's hard, where a little girl can be exactly who she is, perfectly imperfect and completely loved. And that's worth more than all the private schools and trust funds in the world.